Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. They wanted war! We gave them war. Savers versus speculators, Silver Liberation Army. We've got a major scalp. We've got Cameron and Osborne on the run. They are headed out the door. Yes! Stacy, tell us more.
Max Keiser, UK trade deficit hits record high. Surge in imports, deals blow to government hopes for export-led recovery. Max Keiser, I credit you with blowing their hopes away. According to the article, the widening in the deficit followed a 3.8% jump in imports, driven by higher imports of chemicals, oil, and
silver! Silver!
That's correct. All you UK followers out there, you've been buying silver.
That's right. Silver's been massively flooding into the UK, causing this massive trade imbalance, completely destroying Osborne's attempt to stimulate economy using banking tricks and by appeasing the banking terrorists. The Silver Liberation took matters into their own hands. They're buying silver aggressively. The price is going higher. Now Osborne will be carried out on a stretcher because not only is he a plump little weasel who knows nothing about economics, but he's immoral, he's unethical, he's a schmuck, he's worse than Cameron, he's Cameron's little duck.
Well, the UK goods trade deficit with the rest of the world stood at 9.8 billion pounds, much wider than the 8 billion that was forecast. There was an extra 1.8 billion pounds of silver that they weren't expecting.
This is happening all over the world because the Silver Liberation Army understands that all these governments are corrupt. Same thing's going to happen in the U.S. The U.S. will shortly report similar numbers due to the incredible influx of silver and gold by people challenging the banks. The global Occupy movements, that's just a sideshow compared to the Silver Liberation Army. Global insurrection against banker occupation, kind of a sideshow when you compare it to the Silver Liberation Army that's on the march, that has now completely and fundamentally reshaped the global economy.
Well, the UK is also in the news here in the next headline, Max. Tobin tax is a tax on pensioners that will cost 1 million jobs, says Chancellor George Osborne. He says there is not a single banker in the world that is going to pay this tax. There are no banks that are going to pay this tax. The people who will pay this tax are pensioners. So if you want to go and introduce a big tax on pensioners, that is the end result, but at least be honest about who pays this tax. This is George Osborne referring to the Tobin tax, the financial transaction tax. Max, your thoughts? This
is an admission by Osborne that he has absolutely no control over banking terrorists. Remember when Bandar threatened Tony Blair with a 7/7 bombing unless he called off the investigation into the BAE Bandar slush fund? This is Osborne saying the same thing. He's no better than a terrorist. He's no better than Prince Bandar. He's no better than Tony Blair. He supports financial terrorists. He aids and abets financial terrorism. George Osborne, what will the people do to you when they catch up to you? What will they do to you, George Osborne? Are you looking over your shoulder? Do you feel comfortable walking on the streets? Do you? I wouldn't if I were you!
He might be excited because he seems to be a bit of a submissive. And we know this from his history because, of course, a headline from a few weeks ago was phone hacking. Andy Coulson helped spin story of George Osborne and dominatrix. So apparently George Osborne had been involved with some drug-taking dominatrix.
That's right. The news, the Murdoch press broke the story that Osborne was caught in an S&M imbroglio. He plays the role of submissive. That means that the prostitute that he hired spits in his face and slaps him around like a little biatch, as they say, uptown in the hip-hop scene. And he loves it. He loves to be That's his joy de vivre.
It could explain why many people say that bankers are the ones responsible for installing leaders that then hand over all the assets of the nation to us. So it makes sense that repeatedly in the UK, since the deregulation, the Big Bang as they call it, we've had Tories or Conservatives in power because they are like the ones they always get caught in weird submissive scandals. So that could be what's happening there. So George Osborne is claiming, however, that this financial transaction tax is uniquely something that is being taken from the pensioners. Now let's look at what George Osborne and his Independent Bank of England have created with their quantitative easing. Savers lose 43 billion pounds in slow motion bank robbery with worse to come. Savers have been stealthily robbed of 43 43 billion pounds of the real value of their savings since the Bank of England froze interest rates at 0.5% nearly 32 months ago, but there could be worse to come. So the average saver, Max, has lost 2,500 pounds since the crisis.
Right. How does that work exactly? Let's review briefly. To keep the speculator sweet, to keep the cost of money near zero, Bank of England keeps rates near zero using quantitative easing. Osborne endorses it. In effect, those people with savings, the pensioners, the people who have worked all their lives with money in the bank that they anticipate to get a return on, end up subsidizing the speculators. Why doesn't Osborne just write a check to the terrorists around the world and say, here's the money. Please, I'm a submissive. Can you bomb me, please? Because that's exactly what he's doing economically speaking. He is forcing against the will of the hostages, that is the UK public, to pay for the speculators by keeping interest rates at zero. Keeping interest rates at zero, number one, it doesn't stimulate the economy, obviously, because the UK economy is going straight into the gutter. Number two, it only feeds the worst elements of the society that are causing the financial terrorism, the speculators. This is unconscionable. This man is a stark, raving lunatic that needs to be put in a straitjacket and thrown into the maze.
So the article says that the pensioners in particular are largely silent victims of the Bank of England's policy of running negative real interest rates. So here you see the pensioners that George Osborne, the shrieking submissive, claims to be supporting by being against the financial transaction tax. And yet, because of the speculation and the wild derivatives trading and disaster and fraud that his bankers who he submits, because of them, pensioners have already given up 43 billion pounds in only 3 years.
Yeah, and think of it also, this whole idea about you can't tax transactions because it would cause all kinds of duress in the economy. Let's flash to the Bank of New York story. For 30 years, according to Harry Markopoulos, who blew the whistle on Bernie Madoff, Bank of New York, which is a custodian for trillions of dollars of pension accounts, has been stealing 0.3% on every single transaction for 30 years. This is a $500 billion theft from savers. Is the stock trading down? Oh, it's trading up on the news because Osborne and Cameron and Obama and Bernanke submit fraud as their business model, and they're all submissive to the terrorists.
Let's move on to some more fraud and how no matter what, the savers always pay. MF Global clients may have to share cash. So remember, this is MF Global, which is a futures trading firm that went bankrupt. It was run by John Corzine, the former head of Goldman Sachs, the former governor of New Jersey, a former senator. The firm went bankrupt, and they're still missing $593 million of customer accounts, which they commingled with their own. And now the liquidator is saying that unless the missing cash is found, people hoping to recover 100 cents on the dollar may have to give up some of it to other customers, said Stephen Harbeck, the liquidator.
Well, this is beautiful because, remember, people were saying, the system is broken because they are privatizing capitalism while spreading the risk socialistically. The people have to bear the risk and the insiders, the top 1%, take all the gains. And that was a bit of a concept, but now we have a direct evidence with MF Global. What they're saying is the insiders, including John Corzine, former Goldman Sachs guy, stole billions. And so the customers are going to have to pay for the other customers that have had their money stolen. So he didn't steal from every single customer. He stole from lots of customers. And the way they're going to bail these customers out is by having the customers who didn't have their money stolen from them to pay off, to share their money with the customers that did have their money paid off. What are they talking about here? They're going to share in the losses. What kind of ideology is that? How do they use, what propaganda are they using to get people to accept this as rational and okay?
Remember, last week we covered the story of the Chicago Board of Trade brokers throwing applications for McDonald's out the window at protesters, calling themselves the 1%, and suggesting that Occupy Wall Street people are the Marxists. There is nothing more Marxist than that which the Chicago Board of Trade traders created by having to share the wealth. Clients must share, redistribute their wealth due to their own absence of regulation, their absence of self-regulation.
Right. The CME traders in Chicago are pure Marxist, and this is a perfect example of that. And they themselves are barking up the ideological tree toward a system of governance that has absolutely nothing to do with free market capitalism, and to shower the protesters down below with help wanted applications for McDonald's has only got the silver liberation motivated to buy more silver, to put these guys like a silver stake through their heart into the ground, dead, dead, dead again.
And finally, Max, we have discussed before the use of Twitter and that these hedge funds are now using Twitter trends in order to trade. So I want to call your attention to this tweet from Becky Meehan of CNBC. And she said, Italian 10 trending on Twitter. I'm sure bond yields don't trend that often. So if you see from this image here, this is the trending topics. And sure enough, number 2 worldwide was Italian 10, the 10-year bond. What do you think of this, Max?
Well, this is what I've been talking about, price propaganda. On this show, this is the only show in the world that's gone into this idea of price propaganda. On Twitter, it's run by bots. Here you've got financial propaganda and hedge funds with unlimited resources creating robots to trend a topic, to force a topic trending on Twitter, which gets the hedge fund community all aligned on the same trade to go attack Italian bonds. But that's based on signaling to the group vis-a-vis Twitter their intention to financially devastate Italy with these sales and short sales and naked short sales. Remember, they attack Italian bond market with counterfeit paper, with naked short sales. There's no accountability in the system for the amount of naked shorts that they're attacking Italian bonds with. And they've gone from Ireland, they've gone to Greece, they've gone to Portugal, now they're in Italy, now they're talking about France. Every time the Eurozone creates a dollar or a euro in stimulus, they create 100 euros in naked short sales. They're never going to win that war. But the fact is that the tail is wagging the economic and financial dog around the world, and we're totally powerless against an entrenched kleptocracy with unlimited credit, 0% interest rates, with the central banks at their bidding, and politicians just basically lying down and doing nothing about it. So this is the new world order. It's complete manipulation, empowering. It's a kakistocracy. It's rule by the worst qualified. That's the global new world order. It's a kakistocracy. Rule by the stupidest and worst kleptocrats in the world. Okay, Stacy Herbert, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
Don't go away, much more coming your way, so stay right there. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser, special in-studio guest today, Senator Mike Gravel. Senator Gravel was the U.S. Senator for Alaska from 1969 to 1981. He ran for the nomination for president in 2008, first for the Democratic ticket and then the Libertarian. He is the author of Citizen Power Mandate for Change and devotes his time advocating direct democracy initiatives. Mike, welcome to the Keiser Report.
Thank you for having me, Max.
I want to talk to you about 1971 when you read the Pentagon Papers into the public record from the floor of the Senate. Now, how was that received at the time by your fellow senators, and how would you relate that to WikiLeaks today?
What WikiLeaks is doing today is better than what we were doing with the Pentagon Papers. The Pentagon Papers was the history of how 3 presidential administrations had lied to the American people about going in to Vietnam and then staying there and killing, 3 million Southeast Asians, 58,000 Americans. And I want to say, Max, they all died in vain. Vietnam is still a communist country, has most favored trading relationship with us. You can buy Baskin-Robbins, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and in either Hanoi or Ho Chi Minh City.
Okay, so WikiLeaks, again, now it's been attacked financially, something kind of a financial blockade, something new in this digital globalized world by major corporations like PayPal and Visa, who've cut the company off from the financial grid. So it's something back in the Pentagon Papers day they couldn't have done because the system wasn't designed as such. But these corporations now can push a button and excommunicate an entire organization who's not been charged with anything. They just decided on a corporate basis it's convenient for them to get rid of them.
It's the government that's pressuring these institutions to do that. So they're doing the bidding of the government.
But where do you draw the line between the government and corporations, Mike? I mean,
I don't.
Okay, so we can't really say it's not the
one
government.
and the same.
So these major corporations, Visa, MasterCard, the people supplying the predatory lending into the system, they're controlling the outcome of what happens on the policy initiatives in Washington. And there's no government. There's no representative government. There's nobody there standing up for the rights of the people. You know that. I know that. Everyone knows that. It's a farce. It's corporatism.
Totally, and it's worldwide. I don't know, Max, if you're aware of this new study that came out of Zurich, where they examined 43,000 corporations, you know about it, and it filtered down to 1,350 corporations with interlocking directorates and relationships, and they control 60% of the world's wealth.
Now, that's clearly a problem that requires trust busting, as Teddy Roosevelt once was
More
famous.
than trust busting.
Okay,
More than trust busting, because you're operating within the confines of representative government. And when you go there, you don't have a chance to bring about change. You want to bring about change, you've got to bring the people into the operation of government independent of representative government, so that the people can make laws. There's only two venues for change. One is the government, wherein the problem exists. The other is with the people. But the people need procedures to act upon the knowledge they have, and that has to be procedures that permits them to be lawmakers. Cicero, Marcus Cicero, over 2,000 years ago said, liberty, freedom, is participation in power. If you don't participate in power, you are not free, and that applies to all the countries in the world, including Switzerland, because where you do have direct democracy in Switzerland and in some American states, it's controlled by representative government. And that's why I emphasize that it's got to be done independent of representative government. And I have legislation that I've worked on. It took me 7 years to write it. And it can be applied in any country in the world, and it would empower people by going around the government. I have no confidence that the government would ever empower the people.
Okay, so this is what you're into now, direct democracy.
My whole life is in there.
Okay, and as you've just described it, you are globe-trotting with a basically a do-it-yourself kit, how you too can be democratic. If you follow these simple flat pack kind of...
You're right.
It's like an IKEA. You know, you simply put it, you can screw it simple. Here's the simple, you take the best, I would assume, from what the founding fathers of the U.S. had to offer, and you mix it on with some other Cicero and a few other bright minds from the ages, and you go into these countries. You're all over the world with this. You're
all over the world.
How is it, what countries are receptive, and what's been not receptive?
First off, it's receptive by the bottom of the pyramid. People know at the bottom of the pyramid they're being screwed by the system. And so,
okay, take a good example like Egypt. Okay, they just had a revolution. They've been in control of a client state. Mubarak is controlled by America. They want democracy. Now, would you go in there to Cairo? Have you gone in there? Have they looked at it? What's the
No, I've not gone into Egypt. I would not do that. Egypt is controlled by the military, and our military controls their military, because we've been feeding their military $2 billion a year.
But where does our military not control some country somewhere? Where can you go? I mean, some Fiji or some island in the Caribbean, and where is it not? Disneyland and Euro, where is it not controlled?
Tell you the truth, I don't know where to go. And that's the reason why I'm so concerned.
Because we saw you on the street here. We said, hey, that's Mike Gravel. What's he doing down there? He's trying to get democracy started. We said, come on up and be on the show. Here you are. So in other words, you can't get this message out.
I promised the Occupy group in Switzerland, Zurich, that I'll come back next spring, and what they'll do, they're supposed to be taking a vote. And if they decide they want to do it, what I can do is I can read your Constitution, French Constitution, German, and turn around and take this legislation that I've drafted, and I can tweak it for your Constitution, and then give it to you, and then you go out on the street and get the people to vote for it. You don't go to the government. You go around the government, you ask the people. And here's where the rubber hits the road, and that is when the people vote for this. That means the majority of the people in France, if they wanted to be empowered to make laws, they would then vote, not sign a petition, not respond to a poll, actually vote. And we count the votes, and they're registered. And when you have more than 50% of the registered voters vote for this, it is automatically the law of the land. which means that the minute you bring the people into the operation of government, what they become is the senior partners. And anybody who knows about structure of business knows the senior partner is the senior partner and commands what will happen. So it's a win-win. The representative government will do a better job in a day-to-day operation of government, but the people will set the policy designed to satisfy their needs.
And we want to talk about Occupy Wall Street because you've written about this, and so fill us in on your thoughts.
It is actually a miracle. It's a miracle that started with young kids and not so young. They're on the cutting edge of social change. What this is demonstrating is that there's a deep-seated unhappiness in the populace. It's like a boil. This is the tip of the iceberg you're seeing. And I've gone to the one in Switzerland. I've gone to, last night, I went to La Défense and did it here and just told them I honor their efforts. However, there is a problem. Protest movements generally do not succeed because as they fly in the face of the police power of government, they get crushed. And the more effort they make, the more brutal is the crushing. So what they need to do is, over time, they need to be able to turn this around into an actionable item. Forget all the details of the agenda. Just go after one thing.
Well, initially, not having an actionable agenda or item was the good thing about it because it wasn't shot down immediately, ideologically speaking. They just built a big tent. They built a big constituency. Okay, now you're saying at some point they've actually got to have at least one item on the agenda. What is that item?
To empower themselves to make laws. Because if they get the meta legislation I'm talking about, they can address their agenda.
Okay, let me cut in for a second. You talk about changing the law. People have the ability to change the law. This is what they should be working toward. On the other side of the aisle, there seems to be no problem in the ability for banks and others to change laws on a whim. For example, just in the last couple of months, Goldman Sachs, they broke the law when they offered insiders a chance to own Facebook stock above and beyond what the SEC allows them to in terms of a limited number of people eligible for this before the company posts their financials. So their response was, well, we're going to do it anyway. And the SEC's response was, well, maybe we need to change the law. And this is what you hear almost every single week as an instance where the banks on Wall Street, Goldman, JP Morgan, and the rest, they break the law. They break the securities laws. They break major fundamental regulations. And their answer always is, well, the laws aren't catching up to what we're doing as financial engineers. You know, the law needs to change because we're making a market. We're creating the opportunity. Why can't somebody just simply say, look, you're breaking the law and you need to be prosecuted? You can't claim that your defense is that the law hasn't caught up with your genius yet. That's the defense of a serial killer and a psychotic.
When the people make the laws, they will then be able to enforce the law. And how you do it, I'll give you an example. Supposing the people make the law to go ahead and require that banks no longer are sustained by the government. What will happen? Well, once the people have this power, they will not be denied. You see young kids taking to the streets now, but when you get Americans, 60+ million Americans voting to empower themselves to make laws, I got to tell you, I know from personal experience, politicians are cowards and judges are even more cowardly than politicians. And so you now empower the people. The politicians will shape up immediately and recognize that they will handle day to day. Let the people handle the policy. The first thing you do is stop corporations from being treated like a human being. In the constitutional amendment I have, it says that money for an initiative, for or against, can only come from a natural person. What does that mean? That all these unnatural people with all this power to steal and break the law, they can no longer get involved in the lawmaking process, which they do right now because they own the Congress, they own all the governments.
Okay, so we've got about a minute left. To summarize, you've been working on this direct democracy project for a number of years, and you see with this Occupy movement really a golden opportunity for the realization of these ideals. With this group, these people now are just begging to retake back their democracy and their rights. And so you're really enthusiastic by this, right?
In up till now, I've never really had any hope that other than scratching away and being lucky that we could bring it about. But now when I see the Occupy movement rising like a phoenix from nowhere and worldwide immediately, and it'll get legs and depth. And as that's the crisis I've been waiting for, to now push the national initiative and say, the answer is not to protest, the answer is to make yourself lawmakers. And then when they realize that, it's Katie bar the door. Up until now, I exist on a basis of I have faith that when we reach critical mass, the corporations will wake up and say, my God, what's going on? It'll be too late. The people will know this, and you won't have to sell it to the people. They'll just want it.
All right, Mike Gravel, it sounds good, because clearly you've got your expertise mixed with this whole generation of this movement is on the street and ready to go. So there's a tinderbox ready to explode, hopefully for the greater good.
That's right, and it won't explode in a violent way. It'll explode in an evolutionary way, and that's the way it should happen.
Senator Mike Gravel, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Max, thank you for having me.
All right, super, and that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I want to thank my guest, Senator Mike Gravel. If you want to send me an email, please do so at keiserreport@rttv.ru. Until next time, this is Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.